the only thing that you can grow out of. I mean, it's the seeds and the fertilizer and everything as the seeds. You can't grow a plant without the seeds. So if you don't have the seeds of everything that you've done before, there's nothing to grow anyway.
Do you have a minute today?
Yep.
All right, this is our podcast where my daughter LS and I, NDM, discuss topics that we come up with and think that should be delved into. And as we delve into it, we invite you along. And we're happy that you're here. And we hope that you find information and valuable insight as we hope to find ourselves. Welcome. So we go in. The topic today is topics or catalogs. Catalogs, searching things. When you're searching for something, how you find it, how you know that it's there. You have some kind of inclination that you know something, you know a quote or a thought. How do you find that thought?
How do you return to it after you've had it?
Yeah, after you've had it. Well, just in general, let's see how the world operates. So if you're thinking of what would be a quote? The only harm you can do is yourself. If there's harm to you, it's because you did it.
Okay.
That's a concept I think I've heard somewhere. So if I'm going to try to find that quote somewhere, I'm going to search in Google, right? Is that the best place?
That's what I would do. Yeah.
We harm ourselves, only we harm ourselves. And then it has an LDS after that. So there's an LDS statement with that.
You think it's some LDS guy that said that?
Maybe. Types of signs of self-harm. So this is talking about self-harm.
Maybe it suggested LDS because you always search LDS stuff.
Maybe. So in this library, according to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people can harm themselves and others. That's just a sample. So you'd look at that, and then it does have things you've searched for before that augment that search.
So what you're doing right now is trying to find where you found this thought, where this quote came from that you think is a quote.
Yeah, but because I wrote it somewhere, it's just what I was reading recently. So the original inequality of mankind. No, I'd have to search more into it, but I mean, you get a starting place. Google gives us a starting place. So that's just the idea.
Okay. And then as you remember more about what it is, then you can add to your Google search terms.
Right. So you're trying to search keywords. So in Google, we search keywords or phrases or a group of words together. Like anything, you put a group of words together. Inconsistent perform is ever worth using. So I just typed inconsistent worth. And it comes up with stuff. So I could say self-esteem that fluctuates based on external factors or data that contains contradictory values. Are inconsistent workers ever worth using? Whatever two words you want to do, you can do that. Google spits you out something. It spits out 2 or 3 things that it has connected to that.
Uh-huh.
Do indexes work like that in other websites, like a blog post? Have you ever searched a blog post or anything for keywords?
On our own website, I've searched, like we have on our podcast website a search bar in the sidebar. And so when we were getting ready to talk about truth, I was trying to get all of the transcripts from all of our other episodes up so that I could see what we said we would talk about when we talked about truth, because it seemed like we mentioned it in every episode leading up to that.
Right. We always said, we're going to have to talk about this sometime.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about truth. And so I searched the website for which episodes mentioned truth. And so it found me those. But then once I went into each episode, I had to Control F. I had to find in the page the word truth. And I was able to find that.
So the episode, did it pull it from the written transcript?
Yeah.
Is that what it searched for?
It searched for the words that we spoke. Yeah.
Okay, so those are already in there. In a website, you can search a page. That's the Control F. You can find something in a spreadsheet or a document. It'll find a specific word or words. That's one way to do it. So if you have all of your information my thoughts. So I'm talking about a way that's the way the world organizes it. If you have a web page, you can search any word on that web page and find it. find inconsistent. If you ever use that word inconsistent in this whole page, it'll pull up where that is.
It'll pull up all of the instances. And I think a lot of other websites, like you can do that on any web page, but sometimes bloggers put in their tags or their keywords so that it's like guiding you towards an idea. Even if they didn't say the word truth in a podcast, they knew they were talking about that, or in a blog post or something, they knew that's related, and so it's a tag, it's a keyword for that conversation.
Identify your tags, and that's what I'm working on doing in that. I haven't done much of it, but inside our webpage is identifying what the tags are. So if we're talking about a topic, that's the tag topics, the tag ideas that we're discussing in this area. Now that the tag just identifies that it's in this episode, but it doesn't say this is the minute of the episode that it references.
Right.
And I noticed that on articles and things that I'm reading outside, it'll have tags listed on the bottom that has, I don't know, health and safety and competence or whatever is on the bottom in their tags. Those are apparently searchable in their website if I'm reading an article.
Right.
Okay. And then if I enjoy that topic and I want to talk about health and punch that tag, it'll show all the other articles in that web page, in their articles that cover health. And that's the purpose of tags. It gives you a connection to everything else they've said about that topic.
Yeah, it's a way to organize things and make it accessible.
That's the digital. If you have your life in the digital world and it doesn't become too distracting to you and your whole life's in the digital world, you can run your life that way. But you would have to put everything in that digital world.
Yeah, you would have to make it searchable. It's not searchable if it's just on papers thrown around your house.
Right. Like these 2 books. I've got these 2 books that I've written in when I've read books and it's meant something to me. So I got 2 of them. One of them's completely full. Learning journal is what I've called it. One's completely full. The second one is 80% full. And my last entry on that was 21 in the second one. My first entry was 2013.
Okay.
So I've got 12 years, I don't know how it was, 9 years of data here that is unsearchable. I can open up a page and read what I thought, but this is basically unsearchable because it's here. And it's unreadable too, because it's in my writing.
Right. Was that movie and the book and everything, The Meaning of Everything?
I don't know that.
With Mel Gibson. It's about how the Oxford Dictionary came to be.
Oh, is that what that is? No, that was the professor in the Madman.
Yeah, Simon Winchester is the professor, and he wrote another book called The Meaning of Everything. Like they're both hand in hand.
Okay, that's what that is.
Professor and the Madman, that's the story of that, yeah. They didn't have a Control F to find all of the words in all of the books. So they had to sent out to everybody, but put it in the newspaper, I think, calling for people to send in definition, like where they saw these words. That's what if you read this word in a book.
Where in literature, yeah, show me the book, tell me where it was used in literature. And that's where they based that dictionary from, was literary
was how
sources.
The words were used. That's kind of like what you're doing in your books there, your notebooks. You're seeing interesting things in what you're reading, and then you write it down. But now you have to tear out the pages and sort them. You have to put them into their cubbies, A, B, C, D. Like it's how do you do that?
This is what I've been working with, and it's why it comes up as a topic, is because I'm trying to figure out how to do that. One way I thought, when I finish this Learning Journal 1, I have a bookmark in here for where I am reading it. So it just becomes part of my reading thing. I'm on page 34 in this book of other books. So I'm reading my book again to remind me of what I thought at the time and what books I was reading and what it made me think.
That takes a long time to do.
Yeah, it keeps you. Here's an interesting thing too, is I find we're reading again a book that we're going to discuss in a little while, this 7 Habits of Highly Effective. So we're reading it on purpose so that we can discuss it and outline it and identify all the pieces and how it affects. It's interesting to me. I probably read it, well, when the book came out, I read it first, but we'll talk about that at another time. The interesting part to me is I find that the phrases, the ideas, the topics have been inculcated into my life so that they're just me. They're words that I use now. They're things that I've said. I realize I've said that for the last 10 years, and the book came out 30 years ago.
I'm reading another book that I borrowed from you right now that I'm recognizing that too. A lot of the stuff in this book is stuff that you have taken to be who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I commonly do. So it's just who I become that because I've read it, and probably because I've written it.
You wrote it, you took notes.
I took notes on it and I said, this is what it means to me, and this is how I want to adjust, and this is how I've adjusted apparently. These things that I'm reading that I don't recall reading, but I say, that's exactly the way I feel about it. And I feel about it because I inculcated it. I'm using that word as a important word. It's
inculcated. Inoculate? No. Yeah. Well, kind of.
Inculcate just means that you're using it becomes you.
Okay.
You make it integral part of your life, of your thoughts. It's easy to search things that become inculcated and an integral part of your life because you just know that. You know that, I don't know, what do I know? It's better to be happy than sad. It's better not choose to be a victim. Where we talked about victim, it's better to be a creator than a victim. Create something out of what you think you're a victim in. There's things to learn, and it's worthy to talk about things, to discuss them. It's not an argument. It's a discussion, and it's an agreement. You're searching for agreement, not searching for argument. So what's the appropriate way to do that? It takes a long time to read back through what you've written for the number of years that I've written. 40 years worth of writing that I try to decipher. And whether the word said inequity or inequality or ingenuity, I don't know what that word really is. It says something close to that because it looks like.
It starts with an I and ends with a Y.
Yeah. And there's a Y at the end. But all the stuff in between, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I was going to say you could scan all of your papers and have artificial intelligence. Adobe has been recognizing words in text like for a while. I know that if I opened up a PDF file in Adobe Reader, then it'll say, do you want to convert this to searchable text? Or that's just what it can do. Anyway, so I was going to suggest that maybe you could do that, but your handwriting is so atrocious that it wouldn't recognize anything in there. It would have to learn your handwriting first.
Correct. But it could do that. And that's the story about this Doge, that one of the guys, and I don't know his exact name, but he has a documentary about how he became famous and became a genius PhD student at Harvard or Yale or somewhere.
One of the Doge guys?
Yeah, one of the Doge guys. The big balls guy, I think, is who it is.
The big balls? Does he show his balls to everyone?
No,
I'm not familiar with this.
That's his handle. That's his handle, and that's how Elon took on hairy balls and became, it was a big thing about that.
Really?
So this, yeah.
What a world.
Big balls guy. Yeah. What a world. And he's 19 or 18 or something, but he broke a code on a burned out papyrus from 4,000 years.
But that's the same guy?
Yeah, he had AI help him do that. He wrote the model for AI to decipher this. It was a burned piece of papyrus or something, a burned old document, and he interpreted it. He found the interpretation by using AI.
Yeah, and it was scrolled up and everything. I heard that story. I didn't know he was also connected to Elon.
Yeah, he is, and that's why he became famous. That's why he was invited in, because he won all this acclaim for being that amazing. So whoever he is, and maybe we'll identify who he is, but it's a pretty cool documentary talking about how he did it. But someone could take, if I had and I'm sure the AI is going to be easy enough to access before long, if not now, to copy each of those pages and say, understand this writing, and it will understand it very good. And it probably would be able to decipher between the three beginning I and ending Y words that really make sense in that sentence.
Right. But what if it takes all of this knowledge that it gains from your writing and it flags you as a criminal. And then it decides.
That's Minority Report.
It decides that you have to be jailed. You have to be incarcerated because of these ideas that you're holding. Or what if it takes your handwriting and someone hacks into the system and steals your handwriting and makes all kinds of stuff that look like it's from you and is provable because it's your handwriting. That's how we prove if you wrote it or not, because your signature is on it. And now you've been proven to be saying, like, yeah, you're plotting evil deeds, and it's provable because it's written here in your handwriting.
That's the Minority Report, the computers. This is the singularity, technological singularity, that in Minority Report where the computer knows your intent and knows that this is the first action that's going to end in this action 2 years down the road, and we're going to stop it right now. So stopping it there, if they identify that I'm writing something that's going to turn me into Hitler or a Hitlerite person, these are the things that built Hitler and built Marx, Karl Marx, and built Stalin. We don't want to build those guys again. Yeah, we don't want to build those guys again. We see it in your writing. You have to be eliminated. So.
Yeah. So that's the fear about.
Right. And that's the fear. And we talked about that in the singularity idea. I'm not afraid of that whatsoever.
I know you're not.
It's the fear that, and we talked about that in our privacy episode as well, is how much are you supposed to be afraid of someone else using your information or finding you or doing ill to you.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is the other side of that. I don't think that the system, well, like the IRS, we deal with the IRS all the time, and people are afraid of how they're filing their taxes because you don't want to tell them something that they don't need to know. Or maybe they're going to audit me and question whether I have the receipts in the right shoebox. It doesn't matter. When they question you, they'll come up with the answer. It's not necessarily, not that something hypothetical. You came up with a couple hypotheticals there. You don't need to answer every hypothetical you can think of. And we waste more time trying to answer the hypotheticals than just dealing with the life that you have. Well,
I think that is addressed in the Embrace the Suck book that I finished reading. He talks about moving, I think it's in that book, where you are preparing to do something big, like give a presentation or start a business or things like that, and where you're hesitant to do it. Yeah, you're hesitant to do it. It scares you. And so what you have to do is identify everything that could go wrong and figure out how you're going to deal with that. And then you feel prepared and you can go and do it. You plan for the best and prepare for the worst, I think is what they say. Instead of just taking life as it comes, you do have to say, well, what happens? What am I going to do if I use AI to do something and somehow I'm harmed by it?
You do have to do that?
I think you do have to do it. I think it's the smart way to go.
Okay, and this connects back to Byron Katie's work. The work that we just talked about is what's the worst thing that could happen? Not what's the worst thing that could happen.
What's true?
What is the question? What is true? Who are you because
you believe this? Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you because you believe this?
Who would you be if you didn't believe this?
You need to pay attention up to that far. But if you need to determine real quickly, and those are 4 questions, determine real quickly whether it's something you even want to be concerned with.
Yeah. Yeah. Her whole book is titled Loving What Is. So you may as well love what is.
Rather than loving what you expect may happen. All of the things that can keep you locked into not accomplishing something, delaying action. Just take action. So it is, hypotheticals are there. You can do that, but it shouldn't take a long time. It shouldn't bog you down.
Yeah, don't get bogged down, of course. But you do have to prepare, I think.
You presented your preparation. So you presented a good example of what I'm trying to talk about today in saying, I think it's in that book, Embrace the Suck. What gets you to know that that's where it is? And is it necessary? Maybe it's not necessary to know exactly where it is and it's on page 45. If we had, what do they call that type of memory?
Photographic memory, I think.
Yeah. So that you know exactly where everything was that you saw, and you have that. I don't know anyone personally that has that type of memory. I've heard about it. They write stories about it, but I don't know that that really exists. That you can have it actively in your brain all the time, exactly where you read it and what page it's on. That on page 52 in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it talks about this. I know there's something on page 52, but I don't know what it is now.
But which edition are we talking about, right?
Right. It's my page 52.
Yeah. Page 52 of the first edition.
Yeah. Of the book that I'm looking at. So I know that I can go to page 52 and there'll be something valuable there, but I'm not going to do it.
Right. The problem is, how can you find that? You'd have to be diligent in writing it down. One thing I find useful in I don't know if this is true in your copy.
What?
My copy of the 7 Habits book, there is an index at the end of it. And I have been using that, and I have found that it's not exactly comprehensive. I've had to add page numbers to topics, even. But when I write it in there and I look at the index, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that one I added. That's probably important, you know?
Yes. And I've written some numbers in the index too, additional words, but I have my own index on the front.
Yeah.
And so I've always done that with books.
I know. Putting your own
Every book
index.
I read has my own index in the front of it.
That's always intimidated me. I've always wanted to be able to do that, but it's like, I don't know. I have a hard time believing in myself, knowing that I can come up with the accurate topic word to put there.
That it's going to be good enough. Maybe it's not good enough.
Right. Like maybe I'm going to write it and then I'm going to look at it 10 years later and think, what was I thinking there? It's not even right. That's not even useful.
And that's fine if it's not useful, but it was where you were thinking at the time. So it's a history. It's what is. It's embracing what is now.
Okay.
What is this. See, the word on page 52 is iterative. These little processes that we go into, and I didn't even put it in my index here, so I'm going to add it. To iterate, it's doing it over and over again. But every time you iterate something, you're advancing. That's maybe another word we can talk about sometime.
Iterate and reiterate. It's saying again.
Yeah, well, again and again. I mean, that's a redundant phrase of iterate. Iteration means reiterate already.
Iterate means reiterate?
Right.
So there's no first iterate of something?
Iteration. You have a first iteration, then a reiteration of it?
That's what I think.
Okay.
I think iterate doesn't necessarily mean repeated. I don't know.
And if we were writing that dictionary, we could do it. I think iterate does mean repeat.
Perform or utter repeatedly. Yeah, you're right. It looks like.
Yeah, to utter repeat. So an iteration is just going back over. It's a cycle, and so you're going to redo it. It's putting every book. If you start writing that thing in the front, that index in the front, and I put it in the front. Some people put it in the back. The index is in the back of a book. You can put it wherever you want. But if you do that, or if you start writing your thoughts about the 20 pages or 2 pages or 5 pages you just read in another book, that inculcates it. That's the part of inculcation is you need to think about it, put it in your own words, then it becomes yours.
It cements it into your being, into your life.
And we just talked about iteration again. And so in my brain, iteration on page 52 of my book, or in that chapter, it's described there in Stephen Covey's words. And then I put my own understanding on top of it. And I believe it's always a positive iteration. You can't iterate negatively.
No?
You fail. But that's something we'll have to talk about at another time. Anytime you iterate, you're iterating to a positive side. You wouldn't iterate a failure. You would stop the iteration. As soon as you saw that it hurt worse, you wouldn't do it again. You only iterate to the positive. And every time you iterate, it's more positive and more positive. That's the virtuous cycle of iteration. Okay, that's another idea though. This concept of searchable thoughts and searchable ideas, is it useful?
I believe it really is. Being able to find your thoughts, the source of your thoughts maybe, and being able to, you find it and then you're able to explore more around it, whatever somebody else said about it.
Yeah, and that's the word iteration. You can iterate that thought, that individual thought I had 30 years ago when I first wrote it in here, or 13 in the books I'm currently looking at. But I wrote things, I've got boxes of papers that I wrote in the 90s and the 80s. When I was in college, I've got things of that 40 years ago.
And I get to deal with all of it after you die.
Yeah.
Unless you do something about it.
Listen, get AI to look at it and put it together and piece it together so it can be searchable. Then you can say iteration. When did he start thinking about that? And you'll find a thing in 1984, the first time I wrote about it. But then I'm just a nobody. It doesn't matter what I write about. I'm not a professor or a madman, so I can't write a dictionary. That's not.
So what's the use?
What's the use? Yeah. Is it valuable?
If it's valuable for you, it's valuable, I think. Well, and especially since now you're a podcaster, I think it is even more valuable now because of that.
To see how this developed or started. I mean, the things that I've identified that are part of my life, it'd be nice to know, was it just out of this Stephen Covey book, or what other books did it relate to? So that's part of the searching idea. The tags, which other books did I read and how long ago did I write about it, that it started becoming part of me and who I am?
So that's the reason that's one reason it would be useful. Another reason would be you could use it in composing new ideas. You're referencing old ideas or iterating things. It's a way to iterate. You can use it to identify who you are and where you came from, but also identify further things. Does that make sense? Like writers definitely use notes all over the place. I'm astounded at how many notes I've heard some writers take, the writers' journals and stuff like that. We went to a storytelling festival kind of recently, and one of the storytellers we listened to said he keeps a notebook next to his phone. Maybe not next to his phone, because I think he has a cell phone, but like before cell phones, like he had a notebook. He's probably got it everywhere he goes, but he takes notes in it with every conversation that he has, and uses those notes in his stories. Like if he didn't write them down, if he didn't write any of that down, then it would be much harder to be a successful storyteller. I mean, you'd be telling stories of whatever you make up instead of real life, I guess.
Writing down is important in that respect. And then being able to find it. If he has it in a notebook, how did he say he searches it?
Searchable?
How does he know that he wrote it?
Maybe he does read his notebook just like you read yours a little bit.
Reads it as another book in his cycle.
Yeah. Or maybe because, I mean, there's this bullet journal idea that, and I think in the Franklin Covey planners, based on Stephen Covey's habit number 3 or whatever, I remember you and Mom had Franklin Covey planners, and there were like symbols that you would put next to your events, and
yes,
and make it so that you can just flip through it and look for the symbol, and bullet journal people use colors and symbols, and they punch holes in the corners of their journals, like the pages, so that they can just flip to find the one with the star punch out of it, and there's that idea, So, I mean, you can make it easier to find by using things like that, writing in the margins, but it's still not the best method, I think. I don't know.
The best method. I don't know there is a best method.
Maybe not.
Part of the reason that I agree to writing in books and writing these other journals behind the book, when I have an idea that I want to think about, I've got a place to put it. Isn't that I'm going to necessarily read it again there, but that it becomes part of me as I'm writing it. You make the note, like that inculcation. I don't know if on page 52 he even said inculcate. Not inculcate. They said, what was the word? Iterate.
Whatever it is.
Spiral upward. He didn't say iteration. He's talking about the upward spiral of growth. Upward spiral of growth. And that means iteration to me. So I put iterative. He called it an upward spiral of growth, and that to me means iterative. So I put the word iterative, and that means more to me. And so I know that he talks about that concept, not without that specific word.
And by writing it down, you cemented it into your
Right. It becomes that.
being.
And automatically a few minutes ago, I knew it was important, but I didn't know what it was. Now I know what it is. Now from now on, in my brain, in my Google memory active, it's probably going to be, there's always on that page, it's going to be a description of iterative without him saying it. The other thing I learned from this time reading through, gosh, we're talking about that book. I don't want to talk too much about that, but he references Viktor Frankl 3 or 4 times. He never quotes Viktor Frankl. He never quotes him directly. So in Viktor Frankl's work, it doesn't say what he's using. He's summarizing and putting his own words on top of Viktor Frankl's work.
Okay. He does quote a lot of other people, but why does he not ever directly quote Frankl?
Because Frankl wasn't succinct enough, I bet.
Huh. Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Frankl just wasn't a good writer.
You're right, maybe. He consolidated the concept into words that he could say in one sentence because he was writing a book.
Yeah.
So, certainly.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the first thing.
Writing it down with your pen is a way of cementing it into who you are. And do you think, I mean, I've heard that writing it down like that is actually better for that type of thing than typing into a note system. Like
because
that actual
somehow your
kinetic
hand and moving, the kinetic movement of your hand in the page makes it more you.
Yeah, it makes it more solid. You remember it better. But then they also say, if you had a special scent that you were smelling while you were doing that too, then every time you smell that scent, then you'll remember what it was. There's areas in my workplace that I remember listening to a Stephen King book while I was vacuuming this one area of the place. And now I don't that's not my job, my duty there anymore, vacuuming that area. But anytime I'm walking by that area, I remember vacuuming and I remember that section of the Stephen King book. Like it's
because
cemented.
Of the smell.
Yeah, the smell and what I was doing. And I mean, everything together comes together every time I'm in that spot. I remember that part of the Stephen King book.
And there is the tapping idea. Tap your head. There's a book that I have talking about the secrets of the millionaire mind. Is that it? See if that's it. Place your hand on your heart and say, I commit to being rich. Touch your head and say, I have the millionaire mind. And if consistently throughout this book, Harv Eker, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, and he uses that because you want to make it in your heart. So you touch your heart, I'm doing this, and touch your head, and that cements that statement in your brain.
And that's something you never
Psychological.
Do other times, except, I mean, you put your hand over your heart when the flag goes by, and you touch your head when you've got a headache, but
saying put your hand on your heart, that's just saying you got to be American.
You've got to be
maybe
patriotic.
Maybe they're trying to make us do stuff.
Which is actually kind of what I think. I think it's a way to get everyone doing the same thing, feeling like they're part of the community, and so they're going to act like they're part of a community if they're doing that.
Right. And maybe it's a good thing. So that's probably a good thing. There's nothing unless you're German.
Unless you're okay, now the modern day Germans, they're fine probably.
They're okay. Yeah. Or Ukrainian, current modern. Yeah, no, the Ukrainians are fine. I don't know who.
Who can we be? North Korea.
North Korean. Getting some value of that. So you do have triggers to your memory, to your catalog. And this is kind of a catalog of what we know and what makes us, what we should be able to be search for. Maybe before I talk about the catalog idea fully, there's other books that I've written into. We talked about dream books a while ago where I had a dream. I found my other book. This one, the first writing in it was 2014. So I think the one that I looked at was 21 is where this one started. 21 was my first dream in this book. 23, actually. And I've got a lot of this book to fill up still. And I've written 2 more dreams since the one that we talked about.
2 more lucid dreams?
But it's full of dreams. It's full of things. So I can, more lucid dreams. Well, yeah, lucid dreams, because that's why you can write about it. More dreams that meant something to me. I'm going to read one just for the fun of it. December 11th of 2015, 6:14 a.m. I dreamed last night that I had grown a bit of a very long arm.
Can't even read your handwriting.
Yeah, that's why this is fun. I had grown I had grown or built a very long arm that I used to encircle my wife and my kids. I used it to protect them and to cover them, but my wife didn't seem to pay much attention to it or even be aware it was there. Nevertheless, I continued to cover or protect her with my long arm.
That's nice.
So even though she wasn't aware of it, my kids weren't aware of it, I knew that I built a long arm around. So it probably has a very important, well, it is. It feels good. And that's just a sample, so I can remember that. It's a long arm that you circle around people. And that was 2015. That was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I built this arm.
I have a dream that I would like to share with you from my dream journal. I've only written 2 dreams in here. This one's a short one from 2015.
All right.
I'm in sacrament meeting for the first time in a long time. They say the sacrament pair, and instead of bread, everyone gets a cinnamon roll with cream cheese frosting in a plastic container. But we only get a plastic spoon to eat it with. So what does that mean?
And that's all you wanted to write about it at the time.
Yeah.
It means you should have written more things so that you could describe. I mean, the questions I have, do you have any questions about it?
Yeah, why a plastic spoon? Why was I concerned that it was a plastic spoon? Because
What's
I feel
the difference
like I
about
could.
a plastic spoon?
Well, I feel like maybe it should have been a fork, but you could eat a cinnamon roll with a spoon.
Yeah, that it should have been a fork. How big was the cinnamon roll covered with cream cheese frosting? That's what I'm wondering too.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember that part of the dream.
Yeah, I would have, see, lucid dreaming, I would have asked that question. How big is this? And how, does it take 2 guys to carry that basket?
Yeah.
How do they get the basket with those big cinnamon rolls for 200 people? And maybe there was only 5 people there. So
Maybe.
Those questions you ask that in your dream and you start looking around. That's lucid dreaming. Start looking around. And I think in that one that I read, I don't know that I built it or grew it, but it was an arm that I controlled, clearly. I controlled the arm.
It was
yours. It
yours.
encircled my family and my wife.
You've got your dream notebook and you've got your learning journal is what you called it. And
yeah, learning journal is what I'm writing. Dream journal. And I have different just life journals that are there too.
And you've got a billion papers that you just take notes on everything.
If you look at my desk, there's papers everywhere. And every conversation, like you said, you're a writer. Every time I talk to somebody, I write the information on a paper. And I don't have it electronically. I can't search it, but I have, and this is clients, this is business stuff, but everything is just written on papers. And so I can scan back through that page and where I wrote it. And I remember writing it. So it means I know where I can find that bit of information. And I have paper clips collating a number of things that deal with one person or one situation. But then I have this, usually I can do it on one page. So I just have one page for this guy and I'm actively working on his stuff and it's all on that page. And I've filled in tiny spaces and I have tiny spaces written on the side because I had something else to say and it'll fit right here in this little spot. I fit it in that little spot instead of adding another page. So papers everywhere, that's active life. But when I have an idea, I've got a box that has ideas in it.
Your idea box?
I've written out. Yeah, it's an idea. It's just spare papers, but I found a box to put it in. That's my active one. And I've got 2 piles sitting over there, 2 piles there, one up on the shelf, a whole box of things from the last 4 or 5 years down here.
Well, it seems like you are kind of categorizing your papers into piles. So
well, they're piled.
They're still
chronological.
piles.
So this box is just my current chronology. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 5th one is way old stuff, but I've looked through it a couple of times and I'm still keeping the things, but I've never organized it into a file box.
Yeah. How would you even do that?
That's probably why I'm asking this question. Why I'm working on this is I got all this stuff. I know that it's here and it's in paper just stacked. How do I organize it so that it's accessible? So that's the catalog idea. Yeah, that's the catalog idea. Yeah, the only way I can find anything in that stack is to go down into that stack and look at everything and then see if there's anything that I needed.
Oh, yeah. Right. So I think another question to ask is how can you do it without purchasing a bunch of stuff to help you with it? Like, are you able to categorize all of these without buying thousands of index cards and little index card holders and
Okay.
a shelf to put that on,
Talk about that, because that's the library. A library is organized with card catalog. And when I was a kid, you'd go to the card catalog and you'd thumb through them. Now you don't do that anymore.
That stopped before I started going to the library, even.
Yeah.
It was electronic at that point.
The term is OPAC, which means online something. I didn't write it on my page here.
What is the term? Zopac?
OPAC.
OPAC.
Yeah, library search for keywords. I don't know what OPAC stands for, but OPAC. Online, golly. It is the exact term, but I forgot to write what it meant. OPAC, Online Public Access Catalog. That's what it stands for.
Okay.
It's the Online Public Access Catalog for libraries, and maybe it's all of them, or maybe each library has their own online public access.
Well, all the libraries use the Dewey Decimal System. You can...
Right. But that's...
Every book has its
card
own...
catalogs. Yeah. Has its
number,
own area.
right.
And the Library of Congress keeps every one that's published. So there is a library that has every published work.
Yeah.
But inside your library, you could do a card catalog in your house. And that may be useful for me because I have 3,000 or 10,000 books. They're on every shelf, and I put this new shelf, I'm going to fill it up with my books. It'd be interesting if I could card catalog that. I don't know if I want to use the Dewey Decimal System or some other system. I've heard 3 or 4 systems on cataloging the books that you have. And I think I'd want to use some other system on how important they are, or some people have organized it based on the date it's written. And, that's valuable. And maybe I'll still categorize generally early writings before 1600, and then the 1700s books, and the 1900 books, and the 1800 books, and then 1950s and 1970s, something like that. Some limitation to that. I do have, I started doing this at some point. I've got some files in here. I have on my chair about 100 files, just manila envelope file folders. And I've got a file cabinet. And there's another file cabinet out in the storage that's a 4-drawer file cabinet. I could file all this stuff in those words, and then I'd have an easy place to search alphabetically for ideas, concepts of my papers.
Well, what if your paper has 4 different concepts on it? Do you have to cut it up, paste it on other papers? Do you make a copy and put a copy of that page in each concepts folder? Oh, and I have a question. Do you think Manila folder is just like Kleenex? Like that's the brand, the first brand of folders, and that's why they're called Manila folders?
Or is it the color?
But they kind of look, they're beige, but I always thought they were vanilla folders.
Maybe Manila was the first company that put them together. I don't know.
I'm Googling it.
Look that up. Look that up and see. Where did that word come from?
Why do they call it Manila folders? Manila component of the name originates from Manila hemp, named after Manila, the capital of the Philippines. So Manila hemp was the main material for Manila folders before they started just making them out of paper. So they used to have Manila envelopes and Manila paper as well. Interesting.
So it is kind of like Kleenex in that respect.
Kind of.
It was the brand. It was the brand of the thing they were using.
Manila hemp suggests it's a plant. So I don't know. But yeah.
Well, hemp is
that's
a plant.
Interesting.
Manila hemp is specifically from the Philippines.
Yeah, the Filipino hemp.
Yeah, that was the preferred hemp of the day. So a catalog system.
Yeah. So my question
would help you be able to identify.
Was how do you split if your paper has 4 different categories on it? Then what do you do at that point? That's like a logistic issue, I guess. So the question is, do you want all of those files in your house?
Yeah, well, the topics, that's like keywords. If you write an article, it's going to have 6 or 8 tags in it. 6 or 8 different tags, different ideas, different concepts that connect. It would seem if I wanted to maintain it, if you want to maintain your system manually, you would have to copy it and put that actual page that has these 6 concepts on it in 6 different files.
In each of those locations.
In each tag, which electronically, you don't have to do that. Electronically, you put it in your blog page and then you tag 6 different keywords to it. and then it's done. So that's a digital answer to the question, right?
Yeah. Now, I have another argument for maybe why you shouldn't do that. Don't piece apart your collection and put them in a bunch of different things, because I think there's something to be said about keeping it in chronological order. It's a history. These papers are your history. Yeah, you don't want to separate it and make it seem like you were thinking this thing earlier than you really were. I mean, it shows your evolution.
So there's a reason. Yeah, and that's the reason for putting your books in chronological order. So you see this concept, Stephen Covey read Viktor Frankl, so Viktor Frankl has to have been written before Covey ever wrote it. And so you're looking at the in time relation, and then so you could look at that and you say, it sounds like this concept is like this other book that was written 20 years earlier as well. So he references. And of course, we all grow based on what we've read from before.
Yeah, maybe you bind all of your papers. If you keep them all in order, you bind them together, and then you just write an index, like a separate index book for your papers. And every time iterate comes up in your papers, you write down, it's on page 354. It's on page 52. And so you just...
Creating my own book. Yeah, the files, and that's what you were talking about. Writers will keep notes, and you keep notes, and you compile your notes into a file or a book. And then you can reference to create the actual work, the final 4th, 10th version that you publish of that work that you started by just compiling it into books, into maybe a file first. Yeah, so keeping it chronologically would make sense. You strategically work your life as you lived it. And as I lived it, it's there. I've got books from when I was in school, in college, and then in high school even, that I've written in. I've been doing this forever. They're not in my live office, but they're in the storage room.
Maybe still intact. Like maybe they haven't had water damage, or storage rooms are dangerous places to keep things.
And then it would give me a chance to look back at 1976 if I want to look at that year and see. I mean, there's a lot of important things about 1976, but there's specific things also that I remember based on. And I probably have written something about that time frame, in that time frame, which would be good to reference.
So then what format would you keep your index in? Is it a book? Is it electronic document? Is it index cards?
Yeah, instead of index cards, because the card catalog for libraries is now this online public access catalog. I'd find some way to do it electronically.
Yeah, it's a lot faster to type and search. Like if you have a list of 400 topics that you've got to put stuff on, it's much better than having a book of 400 pages to flip through to find that topic, right?
Right. And so with that online catalog, that would identify that in January of 1976, I wrote about Lee Iacocca. I mean, that's in my brain, my online thing. Lee Iacocca is the most important thing that happened in 1976.
Yeah.
It would have been July or August or October of that year that he said, I can never run for president. So, and I know we've talked about that in the last little while too. So it's been in my brain. It's been part of my life for forever. But if I had the actual writing, I could put that in, and that references politics, and it references business, references bicentennial. There's all kinds of things that it could put together. But on your electronic database or online database, it adds that to the keyword political. So political, it's one of my political thoughts and relates to that's stored in 1976 file. So I can actually look at the document in my 76 file or book.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't do that?
Because it takes time. The only reason is it would take time to organize.
It just takes too much time. I'm thinking of another book that I just finished reading, was The 1 Second After, about the electromagnetic pulse and how everything electronic was just useless at that point. You lose your spreadsheet. It's not there anymore. Your index is gone. All of your papers are still there, so you still have that, but you can't search them anymore. And then you lose all of that time that you spent putting it together.
Well, even there, the backups are gone too, right?
Yeah, everything. The ones you printed out. If you backed it up with a printout, then you've got that.
Yeah, so if it references the printout and I didn't just scan it all up and then throw away all my papers, burn all my papers, as long as I kept the papers. And then in that case, in the fire, they completely burn and the papers are gone, but I've got my electronic tabs that said in 76, I thought political. I don't know what it says on that page because all I have is the keyword.
All you have is a keyword. So you have to scan every paper too. We're preparing for the worst, right? Keep everything on an off-site location.
And these, of course, are not necessarily vital, important works.
Right. It's a hobby. These things that you've written is a hobby.
And it's a hobby, though, that has meant a lot. So it means a lot. But I'd like to be able to search it. And I'm thinking about that dream that I read. I can piece together a lot of things that I've done that are the realization of that dream.
That arm, right?
So that arm 10 years ago is effective, and it's still effective now. I'm using it. That's why we talk. Unfortunately, you're inside that arm. Unfortunate or fortunate. And maybe you've learned that and you've circled the arm around me and said, let's have these conversations. It just makes sense.
It just makes sense. Yeah, maybe.
So it doesn't lose importance.
Yeah. Are we talking about the logistics of this index, or are we talking about why you would have an index?
Both of those. I mean, the logistics is the fact there's catalogs and they exist for a purpose. They exist so you can find something, so you can write. I mean, if you're ever going to put together a report or formulate a new idea, a new concept, it's like you said, there's new growth that needs to come out of everything that you've done before. In order to do that, you have to reference it.
That's the only thing that you can grow out of. I mean, it's the seeds and the fertilizer and everything. Well, it's the seeds. You can't grow a plant without the seeds. So if you don't have the seeds of everything that you've done before, there's nothing to grow anyway.
Right. And it's just like that word, what did I iterate? Iterative. If I didn't have that in my brain, I couldn't have said, this means it, the way Steve Covey wrote his phrases. You can't tie that together. It's the building of life, tying words and concepts together. And then I want to be able to search it.
Yeah, being able to search it is, I think, valuable. There's writing it down, there's documenting what's happening, but then if you can't do anything with that, then it's practically pointless to even write it down in the first place, right?
If you can't access it.
Yeah. If you can't use it, if it's inaccessible.
That's automatic. See, automatically that has value. And that's the only value I've been using in my life up to this, is writing it down. The value of it is it helps you inculcate it in your life by putting your words on top of it, by restating it in your own words and restating with your own pen. So that value is automatic. That's why I've done it for 50 years. But that now the second value, the second way to use that is what I'm considering now is how can I go back and search that? How can I be more efficient in what I remember that I did, rather than just open a book randomly or look into a stack randomly and find something?
Well, you could do that. You could do it that way. Just fly by the spirit, I guess, inspiration. Close your eyes and say, it's in here.
And it's this page in that stack, Happy Fall, September of 21. And this is just a city newsletter. So I didn't write it, and it gets ripped up and thrown in the trash. But
wait.
That's part of organizing.
Don't throw it away.
You shouldn't have just thrown it away?
That's history.
Okay, yeah. It's history for the people who wrote the newsletter, though. It's not history for me, because I didn't make any notes on it. Things that I made notes on, I have to keep, because that's my
why did you
history.
keep it in the first place? That was 4 years ago.
Right. Because it was in that stack. That stack represents 4 years ago. But that when I'm making the catalog, I can determine, is there something that is important to me and my ego? Is it ego? Is it myself, my works that I'm trying to preserve? I'm trying to build. I don't much care about building what the city did 4 years ago. I'm caring about what I built 4 years ago. So if my words are on it, then I may want to keep it.
Did you check to see if you were even mentioned in it?
No. Well, I did read it, talked about animal permits. I was part of that. My name wasn't in it, though. Yeah, my name wouldn't be. I had animal permits at the time. It related to me. Yeah, I could say, here's the regulation I was dealing with. They required this.
Okay. It would be useful to be able to go back and see these, like, yeah, to know where everything is.
To reference something specifically.
And at some point you're referencing yourself. Like, you have all of these self-written papers that you've got to reference back for yourself. It's maybe not useful for anyone else. But books you read, do you include in your own index quotes or ideas that you find in the books that you've read too? That's part of your papers.
Well, that's what that whole learning journal is. The whole learning journal is that concept. You're identifying what's in the book and what it meant to you. Even that page. And I'm writing it on the book as well. So, if you pick up a book from my library, it's written in and it has a title. This is one I haven't really done, but I've got one item on the top of it. This is a signed copy even. What do you know? And it's signed to someone else. But the author signed it.
You must have picked
So
it
I
up
picked
from
it up in a
DI or...
Yeah, I picked it up at a DI or something like that. And I've got writing my writing in the book as I've identified things.
Huh. Signed by the author to not you.
The author signed it to someone else. Yeah, to not me, but he signed it to Sunil, whoever that is. Together we're better. Someone special to him that he wasn't special enough to her to keep the book. So, and maybe she died. Who knows? I don't know how it got to wherever I picked it up.
All of these papers in these books, it would be really easy for somebody after you die. It would be really easy for somebody to see it and think trash and just throw it all away.
Yeah, or give the books to DI and then all of mine. And that may be another place I need to catalog the ones that are autographed by the author, because I have quite a few in that category.
Yeah, but it would be difficult for me, I think,
to throw them away.
Yeah, it would be just because we're having this conversation, so I understand this is your history. All of this is you. It's part of who you are. Our conversations, now that we're recording them, will have to be around forever and ever. Like, we can't ever get rid of any of these, because this is who I am and this is who you are, right? This is our history. And so all those papers and all of the notes in your books, yeah.
Maybe we should print the transcript.
Print it to get it off of the...
To get it off the internet. Off of the second after problem.
We just need a Faraday cage. I think that's what it is. We have to have a hardened space that's protected from EMP that we put backups into. Okay,
so if that's the case, do you not think that Amazon has a Faraday cloud? Anyone who has a cloud has to have a Faraday cage around their material,
but
their
it's
servers.
Quite possible that they don't actually.
Right now, but in 3 months after they've read the book, they'll have it.
This book is not a new book.
But they don't want to lose their data. I mean, if you're a company that's providing cloud storage services, clearly you want to say an EMP pulse is not going to damage your documents with us. So we're charging you $8 a month instead of $2.
Yeah. You and me are not paying extra money for our website or our storage. We're not.
To be secure.
Yeah.
Right.
We're paying the very littlest that we can, and a lot of the stuff is free. And so it's likely that our storage spaces are not safe.
Not secure. And if you could find a way to microprint the text that you'd have to use a magnifying glass to read it, you don't need to use 20 pages or each episode would be, an hour and a half. It's probably 80 pages if you printed it.
Probably 80 pages.
Yeah. So if you could find a way to microprint into just a group, that'd be something to search.
Yeah. To figure out
that
if
way
we can.
You can save it in print. You could have it in your fire safe or your fire. I got a file cabinet that's fireproof file cabinet for all your very important papers. If this happens to be your history and all that stuff. So in case the house does burn down, the cabinet's not going to burn.
Yeah. Maybe a Faraday cage wouldn't be that hard to build though.
It's not. And so that's why it wouldn't be unheard of that the facilities already are Faraday caged, sealed.
Yeah. So in the book, the president and the vice president die because Air Force One was not hardened. They didn't take they just didn't take the precaution to protect it against an EMP attack. Maybe because they never thought that it would happen.
They didn't think it would happen. I'm looking at a Faraday cage with Amazon. There's a Quora article with the Faraday box on Amazon help electronics. Faraday boxes on Amazon. Oh, that's just Faraday boxes available to sell, not whether Amazon is Faraday caged there. This is talking about them specifically.
You can't trust that the corporations that are making money off of you are keeping your data the most secure that it can. Like, you just can't trust that, because
you can't trust that they will do it.
Yeah.
Why can't you?
Because maybe it's not profitable. Like, they'd have to have people concerned about that. Enough people would have to be concerned about it for them to make it happen. And I don't think enough people are concerned about that.
Everything online here, even from AI, says they sell Faraday cages. You can build it this way. You protect your own stuff with Faraday cage. It doesn't say that Amazon's factories, their server plants, are Faraday safe or Faraday cages themselves.
You got to take care of yourself too, though. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's still one of those hypotheticals.
Right. It's implied in this book that it can happen if someone decided to make it happen, but it is a hypothetical.
Back to the topic. So this is all fun, talking about wars and things, potential things that can happen to ruin your catalog. You ask the question, would it be worthwhile? No, what was your question? The value of it. Is there a value of cataloging your life so that you can search it? There is, for my life, there is. I feel like it is a value. And maybe that's an individual question. Some people may say, I don't care what I did 20 years ago. I don't want to know. Never want to know.
Right. And maybe you still haven't hit the amazing thing that you're going to do. Like, maybe you're going to actually be a very important historical figure, and these things do matter to a lot more people in the future. Like Viktor Frankl, he was just a nobody until he was a Holocaust survivor.
Right. He was a nobody professor that was working on logotherapy before he went into the Holocaust, but it didn't have any impetus. It didn't have any value in it until he survived with those concepts.
Yeah. It was nothing.
He would have
until
written
then.
it would have been a nobody book. It would have been a nothing. It's just another concept. But since he proved it out in living experience, it made sense. It then had value. So after I upload all of my things and they decide to cancel me and put me in prison because of my words, and then I finally get through it, then they can see that after, when I'm 120 years old and I come out of prison, they can say, this is how I did it. And then I can write my search for meaning, search for meaning. But it's valuable to me because I still think, and I think that thinking is important, and thinking and growth is important. It's part of that arm that I'm building, is the thinking arm, to make sure that we're aware of each other and maintaining things, maintaining thought and growth. And the better way to grow is to be able to point back to something in the past.
Right. So tell me, how is this index in your theory, your idea of this index, how is it different than a commonplace book?
The index supersedes the commonplace book. A commonplace book is a piece of an index. I think my learning journal is a commonplace book. Describe to me a commonplace book then, from your understanding.
A commonplace book is, in my understanding, it's where you write down what you learn, but you write it down in an organized way. Like, you don't just write it down chronologically. You read a book, and every time that you find an interesting thing in there, you categorize it, and then you write it on that categorized page.
You categorize the book and write it on that categorized page.
You categorize the thought, the quote, the whatever it is that struck you, and you take that page 52 of the 7 Habits book, and you knew it meant iterate to you, and so you have the iteration category in your book, and you write just a snippet of that, like the most important part of that paragraph, and you write where you saw it and what page, so that in the future, when you're trying to remember all of the things that you read about iteration, then you've got on this page in your commonplace book all of those things. It's like a collection. It's a way to collect your thoughts and your quotes your own thoughts, but then your quotes from other books that you've read and articles.
Okay, the one book that I had in high school, I was collecting poems and words and articles and different that meant something based on topics like that. I would have honor. I mean, something I carried in, was it honor? Yeah, honor might have been one of the, what's the thing I carried in my wallet for a long time? There was a quote that was part of me in high school, and it was in my wallet. Humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself than anyone else. It's freedom from thinking of yourself at all. I was trying to learn what humility was because I claimed I was conceited when I was in high school. What that meant. So I said, well,
maybe that's
let me
what that
just
means.
not think about myself. Freedom from thinking about yourself at all. But that went as part of my quote under humility. And I had a quote book and a poem book, and there were poems that I still know, probably all of them in the book. There's some I can't recite the whole piece of, but some of them I can. But I don't have that book in here. That's one of the books that's in storage because it was from 30 or 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So it's in the storage boxes, but it needs to be brought up to date. Those same categories as a commonplace book then?
That's essentially what a commonplace book is where you collect it categorized. Like you're already from the very beginning, when you write it down, it's categorized. You don't just write it down and then categorize it later.
Okay, so you categorize it to start with. You load it on the page. So in your commonplace book, do you leave 2 pages in between it, or do you do it in a 3 binder so you can add pages?
You'd have to leave space, or you would have an index in the front where you're like, this page is pride, but then I filled up the page, and so I had to start pride again on another page. And so in the front, you've got your index, and pride is on page 1, but it's also on page 10, and it's also on page 25. Like I found a lot of pride quotes, but
so that's the idea of your commonplace book. It's the
index.
Card catalog. It's the catalog of it, the index.
Yeah.
It's not where you write your thoughts. I always thought a commonplace book was where you wrote your thoughts.
Oh, I see. But that's your learning journal.
Right. That's your journals. That's other things. That's not where your thoughts go. We did a thing in the family somewhat like that where I just used these spiral binders. And I don't know if you remember this at all, if you have yours. It's a spiral binder.
Did it have an envelope taped in the back?
An envelope with questions in it. Yeah, taped envelope inside of it. And there were questions. The instruction and the direction I gave, and this is how I did it, is you'd write a question and then allow 3 blank pages behind it. And then write your next question in the 4th page back. So you have 3 pages to write that question and then talk about it again. Anytime you're looking at this book, you're going through the whole process. And I think I have 3 more questions I didn't get done. Started in, what was my first one? June of 2016. The last thing I wrote. Where it didn't finish was 11 of 18. November 18 is when I broke out. And that was, so in 2018, we moved. I bought a new house, and chances are this just got dropped. It was in my process in the old house, bought a new house, moved to it, but I found it in the files that I was actively. So you leave 3 pages so you could write a little snippet or a paragraph. And that's generally what it is. You read what you wrote before, and then you add to it with what it means to you, what you're learning, what you're growing with. That's more of a learning journal. So that's not a commonplace book. That's a learning journal.
Right. Yeah. So the commonplace book, in my understanding, is the card catalog, the index, the topical index, the topical guide. It's exactly what a topical guide in the end of the standard works for the LDS Church is.
You're identifying topics that you wrote. It's your taglines, your tag keywords. You have a tag that you want to put on this post, and maybe you do have 5 tags. And so in your commonplace book, you identify that, it's in history, and it's in politics, and it's in humility.
Right. So you write that thing down, all of those different places.
Yeah, it's written 3 places. It's referenced 3 places. And then where you actually keep it in your library is, I don't know. And maybe I'll just do that chronologically. I keep it in my library. It's in, what month are we? March of 2025.
Yeah.
It's in the March 2025 file.
Maybe, yeah. So people, historically, I know that there's some historic figures that have kept a commonplace book like that, and they kept it in a book. But I think today in these days, people find it more effective if they use an index card and index card boxes. I think people are finding that it's easier to keep it organized, to keep it up to date if you just use a card for each thing. And then you can grab, like if you're giving a speech, let's say you're giving a lecture, then you can grab all of the cards in that topic and you have them all there, and you can use them in your writing, or you can have them there with you when you're giving the speech, just in case you want to touch on something else, you know?
Okay, so that's still archaic, the card catalog.
It is, it's index cards, right? But the thing is, that concept of writing it down with your hand better cements it into your brain than if you were typing it out on a computer. And so I think that's why people do the index cards and they don't keep it in Evernote or Google Keep or any of those other things, like, because it gets lost. It's lost. Everything. I have a 2 terabyte Google Drive storage, and it's halfway full, but it's full of stuff that I don't even know is there, but I can't ever get rid of it because what if it's important? Like, that's a major project I have ahead of me someday, is going through my Google Drive to see what is there. I paid $25 a year. I think maybe it might be actually $20 a month. I don't even know how much I pay. I'm paying for this storage because I can't get rid of any of it.
And it's stored in the cloud somewhere.
Yeah, and I don't know what's there. That's the thing, is I saved all of these documents and screenshots of important things, and it's gone. It's like I never did it because it's all digital.
It's out of sight, out of mind. It's what it is now. It's like me picking up the thing out of that stack and finding out it was something that I really didn't want. So I threw one piece away out of that stack. And you can quickly delete those things that aren't important to you out of that.
Yeah, I can quickly do that. And I could probably quickly drop things into folders of categories, but then do I remember it's there? That was such a small task. I think it's much better if I would only just write it down on a card, you know? Or in a book. I mean, I could do it in a book. I have a book that I've started, but...
So let's say that I created a system. There's space, and it's a functional thing. A commonplace book in cards is harder. It makes sense to do your learning journals in writing. You're writing what you think about it. But to identify, all you're doing is identifying its location with a commonplace book then. That is your card catalog. I think it's a waste of time it's a waste of space and a waste of time and a waste of searchability. You can't easily search that card catalog.
If your card catalog is in categories, if you've got a slot in a holder for iterate, and you've got another slot for pride and another slot for truth,
there's no difference. And you think there's a difference between that and having it online, a truth category with 50 entries underneath it on Evernote or something. You have a truth page.
Maybe. I mean,
a truth page of your spreadsheet.
Maybe that's just a matter of preference then, in that regard. Like, if you prefer to write it down and have it all in your hands, or if you prefer to have it all online.
And the other thing you said is you want to do it with what you have. I don't want to go out and buy 10,000 index cards to create this topic catalog. I want to create 10,000 lines on my spreadsheet, and each line has its own topic, and then you can fill in an unlimited number of things in those cells.
Provided you're always creating a copy, backing it up off of that whatever device that you're doing it on.
Only if you're worried about the second after.
Yeah, and well, there's other things too.
Or not saving it.
Some stupid things. Yeah, stupid things like that where it just doesn't get saved and everything gets lost. All of the work that you just did.
And that's why you have your backup, your 2 terabyte system in the cloud somewhere in its non-Faraday cage, so that when the second after happens, you lose all that anyway.
I lose all of that anyway. It was never worth it anyway.
But at least it's saved there for now. So you save it where you can save it.
If I was actually gung-ho on a commonplace thing, the thing with keeping a learning journal and then an index separate from that is that adds a step. And I think that's where I would get hung up and give up. Maybe not give up intentionally or consciously, but I'd be like, this is a lot of work, so I'm going to pause, and then I just don't get back to it for 10 years. So I think writing it in a book where I've got one page is a topic, and then if I fill that page up, I just start a new page for that topic later on, and the index is right there in the front of the book. I think that's the way I would do it. And it wouldn't be in alphabetical order because it would be as I come across them. As I come across a new topic, that would be the next page.
Then how do you identify, you say this is, and then you'd have to put an index in the front of that book.
Yeah, there would be an
Or
index.
you still have to have an index somewhere that says page, like you said, page 5 and page 19 and page 32 are pride. And these are all my, because I'm so proud, my ego is so big. I've got all kinds of things on pride.
I've got a lot of pages for pride. But yeah, so you set aside 2 or 3 pages in the front for your index. And then if you need more pages, maybe you just take a piece of paper and you tape it in. And there's another index page. Or you could just use a binder with loose leaf lined paper, and that's your Commonplace Book. And you could just throw papers in, and you can organize them. You can alphabetical. What is that word? You can put it in alphabetical order.
Alphabetize.
Alphabeticalize.
Yeah, you gotta have enough problem with this English as a second language thing that you've got going.
Yes. What was my first language?
I don't know. I'm looking for my study guide. I've got a book that I've used to study, and I showed it.
Is it in storage?
I've used it recently, but I don't know. No, because it's something that there it is. It's underneath. No, in that book, I was thinking there are some books, when I'm studying a topic, I'll put the topic in, but I put a space in the front that I left 2 or 3 pages in the front of the last one I did. And so these are the pages you'll find these topics on. So it's kind of like a Commonplace Book, but it's the topics. But then I use the book to actually write my paragraph of information. I don't know that I see, it's a personal thing, that I see the value of having another book just to record where things are.
If you're already recording stuff into another book, that would just be another step for you to have to remember to do.
Yeah, to categorize it. So I'm writing in this study book or my dream journal, and then my dream journal has these 3 tags, and then I have to go to the next book with my 3 tags and put it listed under those 3 tags. I still have to do that, but I'd rather, instead of picking up another book that I'm using shelf space for, if you're a book person, you don't have a special shelf space.
Yeah.
And I've got 5 categories of learning journal type books anyway already. Don't want to add a 6th, but if I put a spreadsheet, I'm thinking I could do it more easily on a spreadsheet, because each page would be maybe, I don't know what the pages are, if you use the columns for the topics and then just the cells underneath them as filling that topic, because you can go down 4,000 cells.
Yeah. You would have more topics than you would things in each topic. If you're going to use a spreadsheet, I'd say make the rows topics, and then the columns are where you put the stuff. That's what I would say.
Because you can go to the right a lot further than you go to straight down. Yeah, it's just easier to see it that way. You're saying it's easier to see it that way with the topics straight down the left side. So you can scan down that.
And you can sort it.
Sort it based on alphabetical, or you say, I want to look at the R's now. I'm looking for Revelation. So, and then you'd have to connect Revelation to dreams and visions and what's the other word? Intuition. How do you connect all those things in one? Maybe that's what you'd use the file boxes in the bottom of a spreadsheet for. These are my generalized collections of topics. There's only 4 things there, but
how would you start on this project? Where do you even begin?
I'm excited about it. Let me tell you what I'm excited about. You just begin on a spreadsheet. You open the spreadsheet up and you type one thing, and you look at this paper, and this paper that I just wrote is my notes for this podcast. So I'm going to have that in my file, and chances are it'll probably go and stay there. So it's card catalog. I may call it catalog. OPAC may not be a word that I use, probably won't. Card catalog, topical search. The title is topical search. So it'd be on 2 things, card catalog, topical search. And it'll go in my spreadsheet, and then it'll go in the file the way I've kind of determined. Files could be chronological. The file right now is March 2025. And it just drops there, but it's on my sheet. And I don't know that it's important, not important that it's specifically a podcast information or work-related information or anything else. It's the topics or what identify it.
Probably doesn't need to be separated into broader categories.
I'm excited to do it, but I'm not excited enough to open the spreadsheet right now and put my file in my file folder.
No, we'll save that for later.
But I can see the light in the tunnel. I mean, that's where I had no idea what I would do with this. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk it through with somebody who was interested enough to discuss back and forth and throw other ideas.
You trapped me.
But I can see the light.
You sat me down.
You've been trapped. And so we did a mastermind group and we figured out some ideas, but I can start that because I can pick up one stack and all I have to do is take one file of my file cabinet and identify the months or years. Maybe I just keep it in years to start with, and then I have to split it out in months because every page that I ever wrote has a date on the top of it.
Yeah, you always date your stuff.
I've always done that. Everything's dated so that I know chronologically where it sits, so that only makes sense that I'll store it. And when I start reading a book or have start it, I usually date the start when it's in my book reading system.
You know, I'm really excited that you're doing this for yourself and I don't have to do it for you when you're 95 or 100.
Yeah. And the whole point, I'm not necessarily saying this, or we're not talking about this so that it can benefit me. It's fun that it benefits me, but that's not what I'm building here. That's not what we're doing. We're putting this in the podcast for all you folks so that the next person, the world that needs changed is going to change because they'll see this concept and they'll say, I hadn't thought about that. And I've got all this stuff and it's stacked up in my garage. I don't know what to do with it. Here's an idea. Here's a possibility. And perhaps sometime later, we'll report how well it's working in our future discussions. As I say, that catalog thing we talked about, I'm going to pull up in my drawer exactly where this is because it's on my spreadsheet. I typed it up. And as easily as we Google search what Shakespeare said, I'll be able to, on that spreadsheet, Google search what I said in 2020.
And maybe you'll have your own website, like just for your own personal stuff that the public people can search, everyone can search, and it's where your index is. You could start your own blog.
So maybe there's a way to put that. Maybe there's a place to put that. If the index is just in the blog, and then someone can call me from Tennessee and say, I looked on your index and it says this is in the file. Could you look in your file and see if you actually have that paper? Open up your file to November 1922.
You're that old. 2022, this is going to be 80 years in the future, right?
Yeah, find that document because I don't believe that really existed back. Or look in your books. In the publication, in the 1990 publication of Jordan Peterson's book, did it really say that? Because it doesn't say it in the current version.
Yeah, right. So that's another thing.
Go to your shelf.
You can't trust. I don't think that you can perfectly trust, news pages and anything online that can be edited to say something that it didn't say before or to not say something that it did say before. You can't trust that. I
mean, I had one book that I bought 20 years ago, and then I just listened to it, and the audio is a different book. There's different things in the audio. It's a newer version. So, and as people update their books and put newer versions, they add new things. And so I didn't want to buy the new version of the book, but in my old book, I wrote what they said.
Yeah.
And said this was added in some additional version because I would have remembered that. It was a topic which was shocking enough that on the audio, it was completely different from what I read in the book earlier. And so I went back to the book and I proved it. I said, yeah, that's not here. Clearly they added a paragraph. And so I added the paragraph in my old copy.
Well, is there anything more for this topic?
I don't have anything else on my notes. I think we've gained a direction forward, a next step, a light at the end of the tunnel. That's the way I look at it. There's something that can see. Do you see any light at the end of your tunnel of your 2 terabyte mess?
No, I mean,
not yet.
Yeah, it's just a big ball of dark lines all jumbled together, and it's moving, and I still can't look at it.
Okay.
I have other things.
Until you find the process that you actually want to accomplish, well, you'll do it at some point when you get that process in place. I think I've identified. I appreciate you talking to me long enough to identify the direction that I'd like to head, and I can do that. It'll look just like my budget spreadsheets, all the finance stuff that I do, that we work through, and it'll just be another spreadsheet. Yeah, look just like it, and I can set pages, and then it can go back in history as far as it needs. This will be fun. Let us close.
Well, next week, let me tell you what I want to talk about next week.
What are we talking about next week?
Virtue signaling. This is going to be, I think, kind of a religious topic next week.
Are we talking about virtue or
virtue signaling?
How people display virtue.
That's
a specific term?
Yep.
So should I look that up, what that means?
Before, if you'd like to, you can. Yeah.
Before we talk, to kind of prepare those two words together, though. You don't want to talk about each individual word.
No, I mean, we should talk about each individual word. I think it'll mainly center around the idea of saying your prayers in a closet or whatever. What is the scriptural thing
or
there?
In public.
Or in public, right. Piety and things like that. Like,
I'm right and you're wrong.
Right. But then look at me. See all of the right things that I'm doing, Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I'm planning on for next week.
That's a good idea. So next week we see the importance of what you've held and you think is good. This week we talked about how to categorize what we've learned from the past to help build our future. And maybe next week we can build on that to see what you should actually use and what you actually put in public and what you should keep for yourself. I appreciate your time, LS, and my time, NDM, for being in this conversation. And for any of you listening and all of you listening, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you find as much understanding and development. This is built so that you can build your life. And we want you to build your life. We feel like we need to change the world in some little respect. And this is our best effort to add to the conversation and to add to the beneficial growth and the iterative advancement of humankind. Thank you for joining us. And on our pages, we do have a webpage, doyouhaveaminutepodcast.com. And with that, we again bid you farewell.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night.